Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to NetSock's event on Raspberry Pi home file storage using Samba server on a simple little setup on a Raspberry Pi. So we're going to start from the very beginning, uh, just in case anybody has never used a Raspberry Pi before. But the very first step you should take is downloading. I'd recommend the Pi Imager from the Raspberry Pi website, and then setting up a clean install of Raspberry Pi OS, or formerly Rasbane, on an SD card. And then just boot up the Pi. It'll bring you through the setup steps at the start. Just click through all of them. And when it finally boots up, the only thing really that I'd recommend doing from the start is going in here to Preferences, down to your Raspberry Pi configuration, and then enabling SSH. So by enabling the SSH, it'll let us manage the Pi remotely and set up Samba server a little bit easier. You can still set up the Samba server just by plugging directly into the Pi and doing it that way. You don't need to do it remotely. It'll just make it a lot easier later on if you want to make any changes to it or manage it. So that's the first part, very simple to go through. And all of these slides, you'll be able to watch this video back at the end if you want to follow along with the commands. And at the end, there will be time to go through and try and set it up yourself. And we'll stick around to see if we can give you a hand if anything goes wrong. All right. Now the second step is downloading Samba. So if you've freshly installed Raspberry Pi OS, I would recommend just running apt-get update and then apt-get upgrade. That'll just make sure that everything's up to date. And if it is a fresh install, it can take a while for everything to download and upgrade. So I wouldn't panic if it's running for quite a bit. And then to set up Samba, it's very simple. You just apt-get install Samba and then the Samba common bin. And that'll run and it'll download the Samba files and everything will be set up for you. And that's pretty much most of the heavy lifting. The rest of it just comes down to small editing and tweaks. Step 3 is just setting up the Samba. So with Samba, you can share a directory on the Raspberry Pi. Now that be that on the Pi itself on the SD card, or you can set it up on an external drive. So I know when I set mine up, I had 4 USB slots on it. So I had 4 drives, one connected for photos, the other one for documents, movies, music, etc. But you can do whatever you want with it. So if you use the makedir, just a make directory command and set it up anywhere, it doesn't have to be home Pi shared. That's just what we're going to do for the tutorial. And just make sure you have a directory created that you want to share. And then we go on down here to editing the Samba config files. So I know if I'm going through this very quickly, I'm just going to give a very quick overview of all the steps involved, and then we can go back to the slides then at the end, and we can try set one up together. All right, so the config file is where you make all the changes to the Samba server and set up all the different parts. Most of it's generated for you automatically. In fact, we only have to tweak a very small amount of it to get the basics of the file sharing working. So that's this part here. So when you open that config file, you'll be presented with a big wall of text. And if you just scroll to the very bottom of it, you can put this part of the code anywhere really in it, but I put it down right at the end so you can come back and change it. And it's just these few lines to set it up. What's inside the curly bracket, or sorry, what's inside the square brackets there, that's what you're going to call the share. So when we're connecting to it remotely later on, we won't connect to it directly through the path. We'll connect to it through that name that you put in there. So for this, we'll call it my drive. Then path is simply the path to the directory that you want to share. So we've set up home on user Pi a directory called share. Writable, just make sure that the directory is writable. Now you can have them as only read-only if you want to have, say, a file server set up with people in your on your local network and you just want to share things with them. And then create mask and directory mask is just giving permissions to read and write and execute in the share. Now, public, you can set it to public if you want to, which means that you don't have to set up a user account in the next step, and anybody who has the address and the file path can just connect to it and do what they wish in there. But I'd recommend setting public now so that you have to at least have some level of security for accessing it. All right, and then step 4 is very simple. It's setting up a user account on Samba, which you simply type sudo smb password a, and then Pi is the user. Pi will be, when you set up your Raspberry Pi, the main user name will already be Pi. So you just set up, even though you have a password on the Raspberry Pi, every user, if they want to use the Samba, they have to have a user on the Pi and then a separate password set up for their Samba account. After you've done that, it's just as simple as resetting the Samba server. And when it reloads, it'll load in the config file, which has been added in from previous with all the steps and the paths for where we want to share. It'll boot up and it'll be ready to connect to. So for step 5, to connect, in order to connect to it, we're going to need to know the IP address of the Pi. So while connected to the Pi, you can use hostname I, and that will give you the IP address of the Raspberry Pi there. It's not necessary to do this, but it is very recommended that you set your or reserve your Pi's IP address on your router. Now, it's different for each router to assign a specific IP for a device, but if you go into the router settings, somewhere under DHCP settings, if you have a look, you should be able to find an option just to reserve the IP address for the Pi. Now, you will still be able to connect to it. It's just every so often, if you're turning the Pi on or off, you could the router will assign the Pi a new IP address, and then you'll have to go physically connect to the Pi, run hostname again to get the IP address in order to connect to it remotely. So again, it's not necessary, but it's definitely 100% recommended that you do that just to make things easier for yourself. All right, and then the last part is really about connecting to it, and it's very simple depending on what operating system you're on. So personally, I use a Mac. So in order to connect to it on a Mac, it's very easy. When you're in the Finder, you just go up to the Go tab. Up here, you'll hit Connect to Server, and then you'll type in the address down here. So it'll be SMB:// which just tells that you're trying to connect to a Samba server. And then you'll type in the IP address of your Pi that you got earlier. And then / is my drive. It's whatever you put inside the brackets in the config file. So you can name that whatever. You don't type in the path there. You just type in whatever you've called the share. And then that'll hook up and you can start passing files in and out remotely to your Pi and making changes. And then if you're on a Windows machine, a similar kind of a setup. So you want to open up the File Explorer. You want to go down to this PC where you'll see all your devices and drivers and drives. You'll want to map a network drive. You can go through add network location, but the easier way to do it is to go into the map network drive. Then you want to pick a drive letter, any letter at all. I doubt you'd ever connect enough hard drives to get down to drive Z, so something like that. And then now the only difference between it and the Mac is now we leave out the SMB and we just start with 2 backslashes. Again, whatever the IP address of the Pi that you got was, and then again, the name that you put in the brackets in the config file, and that's it. You can connect that up and it'll appear down here next to your C drive as just a drive connected to the computer, and you can click into it and use it as you would a normal drive that's connected to the computer. And then finally, if you're on a Linux machine, again, if you go to the file or to files, and then down the bottom, there's an option for other locations. And at the very bottom of that, there is an option to connect to a server. And that is identical to how you connect to the Mac. You type the SMB:// IP address, and then again, the name from inside the curly brackets. And that is very quickly the very basics of setting up a Samba server in your home for file storage. At the end of that, you should have a working folder with one shared directory that you can log in with your root Pi user, and you can start sharing files and storing things in the cloud, well, on your own local network. Now, there are many options that you can take expanding this. You can go and add extra users and set up security privileges so that only certain users can access certain shares. You can set up multiple shares on the server file. And in order to do that, it is as simple as just going into the config file and adding another section of this. So every share that you want to make on the server, you just add in this section here. You can copy all the same bits. There's loads of different options you can put in there, but they're the basic ones that you need to get it up and running. And you can hook up external hard drives, have them all shared. It's great. And now that's pretty much the basics of all of that. And we definitely have time to go through just one bonus section. We're just going to take a quick look at adding in, say, another user, and then I'll take a live walkthrough of how the Samba server, how to connect to it and get things running up, and checking the config file and stuff. So just setting up or locking the share to a specific user, it's actually very easy. if you're familiar with Linux, these two commands here for just adding a user. So you can add a user, say adding a user called John and setting a password for John, because every user that's going to be set up on the Samba server needs to have their own user account on the Pi. So once they're set up, again, like you did before for the root Pi account, you just set Samba password A, and then whatever the username is, John in this case. And now the stuff for making the file only visible by the specified users is very easy. It's the exact same stuff as before. You just add in this one line here, valid users, and you can put in all the users that you want to allow to connect to the Pi, like John or Pi here. And you just separate them by space. And then finally, you reboot the Samba server again. And then when it boots up, the config file will read in and it'll check that only when you're logging in, that only valid usernames are able to type in. So that's it. That's it. That's basically how you set up a Samba server and how you allocate users on it. So now I'll stop there for a second if anyone has any questions about any of the material that was up there, and if not, we can go through showing you how it works. Nope. Okay, cool. So let me just switch over very quickly here to the terminal. So the IP address that we got, I already know the IP address of my Pi. Here's one that I've set up earlier. So we're going to go ahead and just SSH into the Pi and just have a quick look around at the config file and everything going on in there. So let's go ahead. There we go. At Pi. Whoops. You know what? Hang on. Let me see, what did I set this up to?
You just spelled SSH wrong. It's you said SH.
I did. Yep, I did. Yep. Thank you very much. Stupid me. All right. Let's go. The pressure's getting to me. Okay. Could not resolve the host name. Bye. I've broken it. That's not good. Let's see. That's working. One second. Backwards. Until I'm very prepared. There we go. Pi at 192.168.86.2, I think is the right one. Yeah, there you go. I have it set up as an alias, which is something that I would definitely recommend, unless you want to forget how to SSH into things. So there we go. This should get us in now. Remember your password. Have an grade. Okay. We'll connect in, make sure that I get this, and then we'll go through it once more, just for my benefit. Okay, I've definitely changed the password now. There we go. All right. Let's try that again. All right, so SSH Pi at 192.168.86.2. There we go. Now let's see if I can remember my password. There we go. Memory test for me. All right, so we're in. Cool. So now let's go have a look at what the actual config file looks like. Let me go back up and get, because we've already proven I can't remember any of these commands. Let's take a look. Okay. I saw it. Samba SMB config. Okay. Samba/smb.conf. There we go. Okay, so this is the Samba config file. So we don't have to worry about any of the stuff up here. You can go playing around with this and changing things if you wish. There is many things that you can mess around with on the server, but what we are concerned with is down here. So this is the one that we set up earlier. So we have a folder on the server, in the one that I've created here is home Pi and then on Pi storage, because I have it stored specifically on the Pi's SD card. Now you can set up different directories pointing to external drives or so. And here is just a valid user who we've put in as Pi, who's the root user, and then Adam, myself, just as a second account I have on it, and nothing else is different. So we'll show you now, connecting to that. So that's up and running. And we'll just exit out of the Pi for a second. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we are going to try to connect to that file. Okay, so we go connect to server. Here is the Pi with the alias that I set up there for Pi SD, which is instead of the path, which was to the on Pi storage. In the brackets, it was just Pi SD, which is the path that we're going to connect to on the Pi. And we have the SMB set up to connect to the server. So we connect there. And there's our root Pi. We've connected to, there's no files on it, none there. And now if we go back to the terminal for a second, and we connect back to the Pi, I'm going to use the alias now, which I would recommend setting up, and I'll show you how to do now in a second. But so there we go. So we're in the Pi now. So now we'll just have a look for where our path is. There it is, on Pi storage. That's where we're storing everything. So we'll just cd into that. Okay, and we'll just check. Absolutely nothing there. Okay, so we'll just create a very quick text file. And make sure that that's there on the Pi. There it is. Okay, so now we'll go back to the desktop, and there it is after showing up in the server that we've connected to. So we can go in there, open the text file. We can add in anything. Hello, netsock. There we go. Just, yeah, there we go. And go back to server. There we go. Hello, netsock. So now the two of them are working between. You can put files up. You can drag files in from your computer, set them up on the Pi storage. You can do whatever, store everything to your heart's content, as long as you have storage for it. And now I just go back there. I just noticed that I had this set up earlier, so it didn't ask me to sign in when I was connecting to that. So let's just go back and see if we can get it to do that now. I'm into that. Yep. There we go. So because I had it set up earlier, it let me already log in. But if you just disconnect it from the server there, this is what it would show up when you first log in. So when you type in and connect to the server, it'll pop up asking you for, can you connect as a guest or a registered user? So if you try and connect to this now here as a guest, it should say problem connecting to the server, because obviously we set it to public no. So not just anybody can get into it. So now if we go in here, and we know we have an account set up on the Samba server called Pi, so we'll try log in as user Pi, and we'll just, there we go. There we go. That's let us connect in because we had Pi in as one of the valid users. And even if you leave out the valid user and just set it to public no, if you try and log in, it'll still require a password, but because the valid user part is missing, it'll just accept any user who is like set up on Samba with a password. It just means that you do have to have a password set up on it to log in if it isn't public. So there we go. And then if we go back again, I'll just disconnect it and check. We set up another one, Adam, as a user. Yep. So we go connect to server, SMB192. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so now Adam is a user. Oops. There we go. And we'll try that again. Let's see, will it let Adam in as a valid user? Yep, there we go. So we have our two valid users, Pi and Adam, set up, and we can try and log in with both of those. And then we'll just try it once more with the user, say, we haven't set up. So we'll just say Jack and put in anything. There we go. So it's only accepting users who we have validated and set up on the Pi, which is pretty much the basics. That's how you set up a Raspberry Pi server using Samba. Very simple, very few commands. You can mess around with it. There's oodles of documentation out there on the web that you can look through and really do what you want with. So I forgot to cover how to create an alias in Bash. So we'll go and do that very quickly. So what you want to do is go to your home directory and then edit a file called .bash profile. And in here, you simply type in alias, whatever you want the alias to be. So for me, I chose Pi for connecting to my Pi, and then equals without any space into whatever you want the command to be in comments. So instead of typing every time SSH Pi at the, which as you can see, I forgot, you can just set up an alias. And then when we have that set up, you come back, load up source.bash profile, just to load in all those. And then if you type in the alias Pi, it should run the command, yep, SSH Pi at 192.168. There you go. And that's it. That's a handy bonus trick. All right.